It's a great honor and a privilege to introduce Rabbi Dov Elkins. We met nearly a year ago in Poland on the Poland trip with Rabbi Adler, and I've been reading some of your books, which are incredible. And it really is such an honor to hear your story and for our listeners to hear more about you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
So, Rav, can I ask, you were born in the States back in 1937?
Philadelphia.
Can I ask, where did your parents come from?
My parents were born in America. My father was born in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, and my mother in Bridgeton, New Jersey.
And your grandparents?
Well, on my father's side, his parents came from Kamenets-Podolsk in the Ukraine. And on my mother's side, her father came from Kiev, and her mother's grandparents came to America in 1882 to Alliance, New Jersey. So her grandparents were married in America.
So they quite a few generations American.
One of the four grandparents goes way back, 140 years. Yeah.
And did you grow up in an observant home?
No, my parents were proudly Jewish, and we had uncles and aunts who were more frum. And when we went to their house and I would ask for a glass of milk after dinner, they would say, well, wait a little while. And I had no idea what they were talking about. But when I decided to become a rabbi, my parents were very happy, and I mean they were committed to Israel and Judaism, and they were typical conservative Jews, non-observant but proud, ethnically Jewish.
And Dov, can I ask, you were born, you look much younger, but you were born in 37.
Right.
So, growing up with the war years, what happened in Europe? Were you aware what was going on?
I had almost no idea. My parents' philosophy was you shield the children from any bad news. And like there were deaths in the family. My father's sister died. His mother,
they were in Europe? They were...
No, they were here in the States.
Okay.
And they went to the funeral and they just didn't tell us where they were going. So they shielded us from any bad news. I had no idea what was going on anywhere. I had one incident in my life where I was about 14 maybe, standing outside of a restaurant in Philadelphia. And it was a long line, it was crowded, and people were pushing one another. And somebody bumped into my mother, or she bumped into somebody, and the person said, they're killing the Jews in Palestine, they ought to kill them here too. And that was the only thing, I had no idea what they were talking about, because I was probably a lot younger actually, maybe 9 or 10. They shielded me from anything bad. That was the way they thought was the best to raise children.
I think it was a lot with Holocaust survivors that they didn't discuss it with their children as well.
Yeah, probably, right.
And growing up, did you ever experience any anti-Semitism?
Almost none. Besides this one event that I mentioned. Once, I grew up in a neighborhood called Logan, North Philadelphia. And it was 98% Jewish, and there was a shul every 2 blocks. And the elementary school that I went to was 90% Jewish, if not more. And the only thing I knew was that there were Jews in the world. I didn't know about the non-Jews. And
it was a public school?
It was a public school, yeah. And one day, walking about 5-6 blocks from the house, I was with two or three of my friends, and a bunch of non-Jews saw us, and they started chasing us and yelling nasty Jewish things, anti-Semitic terms at us. And we just ran away, and they they threw a couple stones at us and that was it. But I experienced almost no anti-Semitism.
And after you did your matriculation, you decided to go to university, to college?
Yes, that was par for the course for our generation. Everybody went to college. The thing was, my mother suddenly passed away when I was in my final year of high school. One day I came home from school. She was perfectly healthy, but she was a heavy smoker. And I found her lying in bed, and she said she had shoveled the snow, and it felt like it was a train wreck, she said. She was hit by a train, lying in bed and writhing in pain. We called the doctor, and within 2 or 3 hours, she had a second heart attack and died. Just suddenly, I was 17 years old. At that point, my brother, I have one older brother, and he was to be married in June. This was in March of 1955. And in that June was his wedding. So he was moving out of the house, and my mother was gone. And for me to go away to college, my father would be all alone. So what I decided to do was to go to a local university, Temple University. And I could stay at home, live at home, and take the bus door to door to college. And that's what I did. I commuted every day to college.
It's very, very noble of you what you did. It's kibbud, it's honoring your parents in a big way.
Yeah, well, I just couldn't leave my father. My father was devastated, as you can imagine. Yeah. So I couldn't leave him alone.
And what did you study at Temple College?
I studied English literature was my major, and courses in philosophy and history mainly, and English literature.
And history, was it general history or?
Yeah, general history.
Including Jewish history?
Well, no, actually, during the 4 years at Temple University, I also went to a Hebrew Teachers College, the Gratz College. It's the oldest Hebrew teachers training school in America. And it was a short ride from the house. And we would go there Sunday for about 7 hours, from 12 to 7, something like that. And one evening, I think Wednesday evening, like 5 to 8 or 5 to 9. So it was 10, 11 hours a week at the Hebrew Teachers College.
Gratz was a very famous historian.
Not that Gratz.
It's not the same Gratz.
No, that was Heinrich Gratz.
And this is
G-R-A-E-T-Z.
Okay.
And this is G-R-A-T-Z. It was a wealthy family. I think one of the Gratz family there was the founder of the Sunday school movement in America. But they were devoted, wealthy Jews, but it was not the Heinrich Gratz was from Germany.
And did this instill a love for Judaism and for Jewish history?
Yeah, that plus my extended family and my youth group, the United Synagogue Youth, USY. I was very involved in the synagogue and Hebrew school and youth group, and more and more as the years go by. I was president of the class all the time, and I gave all the speeches for the student body, and the Hebrew teachers just loved me and nurtured me, and so it grew very, very strongly. And by the time I was a senior in high school, I decided I wanted to be a rabbi. The synagogue I belonged to was Beth Shalom, and the rabbi was very well known, Rabbi Mortimer J. Cohen. He wrote a book called Pathways Through the Bible. It was used in every confirmation class in North America. He was world-class guy, and his sermons were just like I call him the William Jennings Bryan of Judaism. And his sermons were just always uplifting and intellectual. He was a graduate of CCNY and Phi Beta Kappa. He was a brilliant a silver-tongued orator, and he inspired me to,
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
And did any of your friends also follow in this path?
None of my friends, no. I was always, I was not athletic, and everybody was out on the sports field, and I was reading books and studying Judaism. And our senior class trip at Central High School in Philadelphia, everybody, on Saturday morning, everybody went carousing around the city, and I went to shul.
Wow. And your father was happy with your choice?
Yeah, he was very proud. My father had a lot of unfortunate things in my family. My father lived in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania, as an infant, and when his father was a baker. When he was 1 year, my father was 1 year old. His mother was pregnant, and a robber came in the house and killed his father. He was 1 year old.
Oh, shit.
And he had two older sisters, and then a little while after that happened, another boy was born. So there were two girls and two boys, and my father had to quit school in 6th grade to go to work and support the family. So he never had any education whatsoever. But he could read Hebrew. He must have had a tutor or something for a bar mitzvah. There were a lot of things I wish I had asked my father, Oliver Shalom, before he died. There's so many questions that I don't know that I wish both my parents and grandparents, I wish I had asked them all kinds of things about where my family came from in Europe besides my mother's family. I know they came to Alliance, New Jersey in 1882. One of the founders, there was the big Russian immigration that year. There was terrible pogroms. But I don't know where in Russia they came from. I have no idea. I've been trying to find out and can't so far.
And you don't have any old letters or any old documents?
No, I've hired somebody to do some research, and I'm waiting for results. But so far, I know where my mother's father came from, Kiev, and my father's parents came from Kamenets-Podolsk in the Ukraine. But my mother's family, I have no idea where they came from. So I've been trying to find that out. I would love to know. And the few existing relatives who are around, they're in their 90s, and they won't even answer my calls. They're probably not mentally aware. So I just have been having a hard time getting the information.
And once, can I just ask, going back to once you were ordained as a rabbi, what happened then? Which community were you involved in?
Well, our seminary, I was ordained in 1964, and that was the very early stages of the Vietnam War. And our seminary, Jewish Theological Seminary, JTS, had a policy that to be accepted into the seminary, you had to pledge to serve 2 years in the military as a chaplain. Because according to national U.S. law, clergy cannot be conscripted. They have to volunteer. And there are loads of Catholic and Protestant volunteers, but Jews don't volunteer for the chaplaincy. So you had to pledge that when you finished your 5 years of rabbinic training, you had to volunteer as a chaplain, which I did. So I served 2 years in Fort Gordon, Georgia, outside of Augusta, Georgia, and I was a chaplain there for 2 years. And after that, I became assistant rabbi in a large synagogue in Philadelphia, Har Zion, which was like the flagship the synagogue of the conservative movement. And it was a very wonderful experience. For 4 years I was there.
Can I just ask, when you were a chaplain, did you know Rabbi Greenspan? I think he was also a chaplain. I think he actually served in Vietnam as well.
I didn't know him personally, no.
But were there quite a few Jewish chaplains in the army at that time?
Yeah, there were. There were several. There were my whole class almost had to go into the military. They had a choice of Marines or Air Force or Navy or Army. I chose the Army.
And did you have to consult with soldiers that had come back from service in Vietnam?
No, because they were just shipping out to Vietnam. My military base was 8 weeks of training. It was the first place a young man, 18-year-olds from New York City, would come fresh out of high school and go into the Army and train for 8 weeks, basic training. And from there, many of them were shipped out to Vietnam. And some of them, I heard later, died in Vietnam.
It must have been very difficult to...
It was very, but I didn't have to deal with anybody coming back from Vietnam because by that time I was mustered out of service. But in the 4 years at Har Zion, we had one family whose son was in Vietnam and was killed. And I officiated the funeral. That was very, very difficult.
And being a community rabbi, you enjoyed that position?
Oh yes. Well, I always say there are two aspects of being a pulpit rabbi. There's the service to the congregation, which I loved, doing weddings and bris. I wasn't the moel, but I recited the prayers. So we had all kinds of simchas and Shabbat services and sermons and teaching classes, and all that was wonderful. The other side was working with the board of directors, who were always a very obstreperous, difficult bunch of people. And that was not the pleasant part of being a pulpit rabbi. I always had run-ins with people who disagreed with my points of view, and over the years.
It's always with committees, you have different views. And
committees and boards. Mortimer Cohen, the rabbi I grew up with, had a wonderful saying. He said, "My board is like all boards, long, narrow, and wooden. Long-winded, narrow-minded, and wouldn't do this and wouldn't do that."
That's wonderful.
And that his board were like all boards that I've had over the years.
And when can I ask, when did your passion for writing develop?
That's interesting.
Is it when you was maybe preparing your sermons, or?
I always enjoyed writing. As a very young child, I wrote things. But since Rabbi Mortimer Cohen was my ideal, and he had written this famous, wonderful book, everything about him was what I wanted to do. So I always wanted to write. And when I was I think second year in rabbinical school, I read a book on biblical archaeology for children, a teenage book. And it was written by Dr. Azriel Eisenberg, who was the head of Jewish education in New York City. So I wrote a little review of the book. Nobody asked me to, I just wrote the review. And I said, "Isn't it a shame that there's no index to this book? It should have an index." And I sent it off to some Jewish magazine, and Dr. Eisenberg got a hold of the review, and he wrote me a letter, and he said, "I really enjoyed it. He's glad I wrote the review.
Wow.
And would I please create an index for the next edition of the book?" So I immediately created an index within a couple of days, sent it back to him. And then about a week later, I got a letter from him with a long list of archaeological sites. And I couldn't understand what he wrote everything in Hebrew. Azriel Eisenberg was a passionate, devoted Hebraist. And he did everything. He spoke to somebody who understood and wrote. He never said anything in English when he could do it in Hebrew. So he wrote me this long Hebrew letter with a long list of archaeological sites, and I struggled to figure out what he was talking about. And after reading it a few times, I realized what he was saying was, I want to write a sequel to this book, and I want you to be my co-author.
Wow.
So,
That's odd.
I was flabbergasted. I was absolutely thrilled. A book by me and Azriel Eisenberg. Wow. And so I finished the book. Took me a good year, maybe more. I went to a lot of libraries, read articles in French and Hebrew and English, and what he did was he took a discovery and he fictionalized it. He made it really dramatic. You know, the story of how it was found and what scholarly evidence came out of the discovery. So we finished that book called Worlds Lost and Found. And lo and behold, it won the book for the best Jewish juvenile book of the year. So to get a National Jewish Book Award is a very big honor.
And there's a lot of competition.
Yeah, a lot of competition. And Azriel Eisenberg had written maybe 20 books already, and he never got an award for any of his books.
This is a good show.
He was thrilled, and I was thrilled. And we had a big ceremony at the Park Avenue Synagogue in New York, and the winners of the award were asked to speak. So Azriel Eisenberg was the kind of guy who was not in it for kavod. He wanted to nurture students. He was a person who loved to like ha'amidu talmidim harbe. He loved to help young people grow into what they could be. So he asked me to do the talk that night at the award ceremony, and I gave the award, the talk for the award, and then he said, "Well, we have to do another book."
Wow.
So, and it was a very big publisher, Abelard Schumann. They don't exist anymore, but that was a very outstanding publisher. And we did a second book. It didn't win the award, but it was called Treasures from the Dust, and that was.
It was well received.
Yeah, not as much as the first book, because some of the archaeological discoveries were a little bit remote. And, but it was very well received, and it was a great honor. So then, I had 2 books under my belt, and Azriel Eisenberg had already written 20 or more. I thought to myself, hey, this is great, I'll just keep going. So I did 2 more books on my own after that.
Which were they?
Since I was a chaplain, I was reading a lot about U.S. military chaplains from the time of Abraham Lincoln was the first one, and up until the Vietnam War. So I did some research and found about 25 very interesting stories, and I wrote a teenage book of 25 stories of American rabbis who served in the U.S. military. It's called God's Warriors, and that was very well received. And then I read this wonderful book about Rav Kook. And I always admired Rav Kook. Avraham Yitzhak Kook was an amazing, he was the first chief rabbi here in Eretz Yisrael. And there was a book by Abraham Egis, Rabbi Egis. And it was a wonderful book. And I thought to myself, there ought to be a teenage book about Rabbi Kook, because he's such an amazing figure. So I read Rabbi Eges's book, and then I got a hold of a couple Hebrew books and some other research articles and put it all together, and I wrote a book called The Shepherd of Jerusalem, and wrote a whole book of biography of Rav Kook for teenagers. But the adults tell me they enjoy it too. So it's a book, there was one publisher who was very happy to publish it in New York, and he said all the yeshivas are going to want this book, and he sent it around, and then all the yeshivas in New York bought copies of the book.
And anybody from Rav Kook's family, his extended family, did they read the book?
I don't know if they heard of it or not. That's an interesting question. I'm not sure.
And that book was well received within the Orthodox community as well.
Yeah, because the publisher was an Orthodox publisher. And by the way, the book by Azriel Eisenberg and I, the first one, The World's Lost and Found, he had it translated into Hebrew in Israel. It was the only one of my books ever published in Hebrew, translated into Hebrew. And he sent a copy to David Ben-Gurion. And Ben-Gurion wrote back a letter to him in Hebrew, which I have a copy of. He says, this book by you and Mr. Elkins is wonderful, and I'm so glad you wrote it, and so forth. And many, many years later, in my congregation in Princeton, I would take, every summer my wife and I would lead a pilgrimage to Israel with congregants. And one of the stops was Sde Boker, where Ben-Gurion retired in the Negev. And he had a huge library. Actually, he had a huge library in his home in Tel Aviv. And his wife used to complain to him all the time he spent their whole week's budget on buying books. He had books in Greek and Latin and every philosophy. I have more stories about Ben-Gurion if you're interested. But so we went into the library and looking for the book, because I knew Ben-Gurion had a copy of the Hebrew book there somewhere. And it was signed by Azriel Eisenberg, and we searched and searched and searched, and we finally found the book.
In his library.
And so I took it out, and I signed my name in the book too. And we put it back in the library, in Ben-Gurion's library. So
did you ever get to meet Ben-Gurion?
Many times.
Many times.
Azriel Eisenberg became a very important teacher and mentor in my life. He took an interest in me and my development, and he helped me in so many ways. He came when I was ordained at JTS. I saw him sitting in the audience, and I hadn't even invited him.
Wow.
And I said to him, I wish, I only had 4 or 5 tickets. I didn't, I think I'd have enough for you, so I didn't invite you. He says, oh, I get invited, don't worry about it. He says, but you should always invite somebody, even if you don't know if they can come. So he came, he wanted to see me ordained. He was there. And Martin Luther King got an honorary degree at that ordination ceremony that day too. That was interesting.
So you saw Martin Luther King?
Yeah, he was given an honorary degree. And by the way, there's a rabbinical convention of the Rabbinical Assembly every year at the Concord in those days in the Catskills. And Martin Luther King was given an honor presented by Rabbi Heschel at that convention. And about 3 weeks later, he was shot and killed. It was just before his death. It was the day before, it was a week before Pesach. The king was killed, and he was invited to Rabbi Heschel's home for Seder. He was going to go to the Seder at Rabbi Heschel's home, and a week before that was when he was killed.
I think there was a saying that Martin Luther King wrote that anyone who says they with anti-Zionism
They're anti-Semitic.
Exactly. It was a very famous saying of his, coming from such an important icon.
It's a very famous quote, yeah. So back to Azriel Eisenberg, my junior year in Israel, I spent at Hebrew University here in Israel. And I knew Azriel Eisenberg was coming to Israel for a professional visit. He was here for a couple of weeks, and I arranged for him to where he could be housed and all kinds of arrangements I made for him. And he said to me, he was invited to Saturday night. Ben-Gurion had a Bible study group at the home of the Israel president. And he said, I can't go, but I'll give you my ticket.
Wow.
So I went to the Bible study group that Ben-Gurion led in the home of the President of Israel. And all the cabinet was there, Hebrew University professors, the Supreme Court justices, everybody was there. And I wrote...
Do you remember who the president was at that time?
I have it in my memoir book, but I can't remember exactly. It was like the second president of Israel.
So after Weizmann.
After Weizmann, yeah. Might have been Navon. But I think it was before Navon. But Yitzhak, I'll think of it, yeah. But
to be invited to the president's home.
It was an amazing, and Ben Gurion was arguing with Professor Yehezkel Kaufman, one of the leading biblical scholars of Israel, about what geographical path the Israelites under Joshua came to conquer Eretz Yisrael. And Ben Gurion didn't agree with, because he says, I was in charge of the War of Independence in 47, 48, 49, and I know this land, and this is how it happened, and you don't know what you're talking about. And he started getting all kinds of passionate and angry, turned red in the face. And I said, oh my God, he's going to have a heart attack. University professor sitting next to me says, don't worry, every time Ben Gurion gets angry, it adds 10 years to his life. There's another time at Gratz College when he came to speak to the student body, another time at JTS when he came to the student body. I've seen and been with Ben Gurion many, many times. An amazing person. Once, the year I spent at Hebrew University, I was sitting in a philosophy class, and the guest professor was a Princeton University professor. Ironically, I didn't know that later on I would be the rabbi in Princeton. But this was a Princeton University professor of philosophy, well, very well known. I can never think of his name. But I'm sitting there listening to him, and in walks David Ben Gurion with a bodyguard. He was prime minister at the time. Takes his seat in the front row just to listen to this philosophy lecture.
I think the president could have been Ben Tzvi.
That's right. It was Ben Tzvi. You're right. Exactly.
So I must mention, Ben Gurion came to Yeshiva College where I was. This is many years ago, and the whole school, it was like one of the most memorial years.
Remember the year? Because I know when he came to JTS, he also went to Yeshiva University the same week.
And this was Yeshiva College in South Africa. He became on an official visit to South Africa.
Okay.
And the whole school, I think we closed for that day, and it was, I remember it. I remember him coming. He was, but that you had a personal connection.
I remember what he said too. He says, "Habinyanim ba'ir ba'aretz hazot atem lo benitem, rakevet ba'aretz hazot atem lo benitem." And he kept saying, "You got to come to Israel." He says, everything built around here was done by non-Jews. You're living off of the non-Jews. Come to your own homeland. You belong in Israel. He was such a...
He was a force. He was a...
He wanted every Jew to come to Israel. That was the only... very interesting. Shimon Peres came to Princeton University to speak once when I was in Princeton. And the president of the university was Harold Shapiro. He was a member of my synagogue. Wow. And he introduced Shimon Peres. And he gave a little talk about a visit that he made to Israel. Diane's daughter was there in the audience too. She came with Peres to America. Yael Diane. And Harold Shapiro said, I made a trip to Israel with my parents in 1950 just to see if any of our relatives were still alive. And I went on we were in Tel Aviv, and he says, I went on the beach, and there was a man standing on his head. And he says, I had no idea who he was. He told his parents that. Then that night they came down to the lobby, and they saw this man come in, and he says, oh, that's the man that was standing on his head. There he is. And his parents says, that's David Ben Gurion.
There's a very famous picture of him.
Yeah, he did Feldenkrais. He studied with Feldenkrais, who taught him to stand on his head.
Amazing, sure.
Yeah.
But it's so nice. In your community, did you instill in the community a Zionistic ideal, the love for Israel?
All the time. My wife says that every sermon was about Israel. I don't think that's a bit of an exaggeration, but not by much. We instituted pilgrimages to Israel, and we would take 30, 40, 50 people almost every summer to Israel for a 2-week pilgrimage.
And why should just continue? You know, it's wonderful what you did.
Yeah, very strong Zionistic commitment in the congregation, and people to this day tell me, we have kids who grew up in that congregation. My wife was a teacher in the religious school, and she taught a class just on Israel. That was her class, the history of Israel. And between her teaching and my sermons, we have maybe 3, 4, 5 kids today came to the army and made Aliyah.
And it's your good. You contributed a lot.
We sure did. We're very proud of it. Absolutely. Yeah.
And can I ask, being you were in Princeton as the rabbi of the Jewish Center.
Right.
That is one of the most prestigious positions to get. It's a very, very important position.
It is, because Princeton is certainly an outstanding university, and the month that we arrived, the president of the university, since he was a member of the synagogue, had a dinner at the home of the president of the university on the campus, and he invited our board of directors and my wife. It was in our honor of coming to Princeton. We had the board of directors, several Jewish faculty members, and it was in the library of this official residence of the president of the university, and all around the walls were the founders and presidents of the university. Ministers, most of them ministers. And early in Princeton's history, it was no Jews were allowed there. So we thought to ourselves, these guys on the walls, they must be turning over in their graves. The room is filled with them.
There were quotas.
Jews.
That's when they had a quota system.
Yeah. And there still is a quota, I think. At the beginning, there were no Jews allowed there. My wife was on a committee to help raise funds for the university, for the Hillel at the university. And she was told, don't make any phone calls to anybody who graduated before a certain year, because if they're Jewish and they knew what an anti-Semitic atmosphere there was, they're not going to give you a penny.
Wow.
So there was, that was way back, the 30s and 40s. And now, of course, and the current president of Princeton, very interesting story. His name is Christopher, I forget his last name, but he was raised as a Protestant, and his son had a genealogical project in high school. And his son discovered that the family was Jewish.
Unbelievable.
and this Christopher guy, who's now president, is researching into his Jewish roots and studying Judaism, and he considers himself a Jew.
Wow.
So it's interesting, the Jewish connection to Princeton University. A very strong Hillel there, by the way. One of the few in the country paid for by the university. They paid for, built, and maintained the beautiful building for the Hillel Foundation at the university.
And Dov, being in Princeton, how did the interaction between the different streams of Judaism, there was a good connection between like Orthodox and Conservative and Reform?
There were almost no Orthodox Jews in Princeton. It's a very secular, universal type of community. And our synagogue is the only
Even today, it's to this very day?
Even today, there's a Chabad house, but the people who go there are members of my synagogue. They're not really Orthodox Jews. And there's no other synagogue in Princeton. It's the only synagogue in the whole town.
Really?
There are a few synagogues in nearby communities, but this is the only synagogue. It's called the Jewish Center. They didn't call it a synagogue because when it was founded in 1948, they wanted it to be for Reform, Conservative, and Orthodox, for everybody. So they just called it the Jewish Center. And it was not affiliated until, in my tenure, about 2 years before I was going to retire, I said, look, you want to get a conservative rabbi to follow me, you have to become affiliated with the conservative movement, otherwise they're not going to send you a rabbi. So they affiliated in 2003 or so, and then they did get a conservative rabbi, but they would not have.
Whoever was there, the students and the faculty members, everyone got on quite well with each other?
Yes.
There was a good cooperation?
We used to have a joke when I was in seminary. All the faculty in my day in the early 1960s were all Orthodox Jews, mostly trained in Europe at Orthodox yeshivas. And so, and they looked down upon conservative Judaism and the congregational rabbinate. They were only interested in scholarship. And so the joke was that Orthodox faculty training conservative rabbis to serve Reform Jews. Because all the members of conservative synagogues are mostly non-observant and they're Reform in everything but name. So that's the way it was.
But I think in the beginning, conservative and Orthodox were very close aligned. They were very similar in...
Yeah, they were. The conservative Jews were much more observant in the beginning days. As the years went by, today the conservative movement has shrunk a great deal because they've either intermarried and dropped out or become Orthodox. So the Orthodox has grown tremendously. Like my wife and myself, we're not officially Orthodox, but we go to a Chabad synagogue, that's our shul. And many conservative Jews became more from and turned Orthodox, and some intermarried and became nothing. So the conservative movement has probably half of its original size, yeah.
Okay, now I want to ask, I think anybody who knows Dov Elkins knows about your, I think your iconic book, Chicken Soup for the Jewish Soul. You co-authored the book.
Right.
How did that come about?
That's a whole interesting story.
I know, because this is, it is the most amazing book. I've looked at it, I've read parts of it, it's stunning. I would recommend everybody to read it.
It's a wonderful book.
It's incredible.
I can say that because there are 100 stories in there, and I think I wrote one or two, but the rest are ones I collected. Yeah. So I can say that it's a wonderful book.
It's a beautiful compilation, and it's just,
really is.
It's a magnificent, it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, thank you.
How did it come about?
Very
how did
interesting.
you involved in that?
Very interesting. When I was a rabbi in Rochester, New York, there were two educators who traveled from city to city giving week-long workshops in an educational technique called values clarification. It was Sidney Simon and Howard Kirschenbaum. And I was persuaded to attend this week-long workshop. It was a way to teach any subject, Jewish subject, secular subject, math, English, philosophy, history, anything with value emphasis. It was a wonderful, wonderful workshop. And I started to get interested in this field, and I wrote a book called Jewish Values Clarification. And I started to be interested in humanistic psychology, which was the basis of this values orientation. Because Viktor Frankl started a certain type of therapy that was different from Freud and others, in that it was if you had values and if you had meaning in your life, that was a cure for emotional problems. Was not lying on a sofa for 10 years in psychoanalysis. It was to find meaning in your life. And this educational process had to do with finding meaning. So I began to be very much interested in that whole field, and started taking workshops around the country. One of them was in Amherst, Massachusetts, near UMass, with a guy named Jack Canfield. And he led a 2-week workshop on Gestalt therapy, which I went to and was very impressed. And Jack and I became very personal, close friends. He was interested in developing self-esteem because he felt that self-esteem was the key to mental well-being and educational success. If you had confidence in yourself, you could be a good learner. So he asked me if I would plan 4 workshops around the country, in California, in Texas, Chicago, and Philadelphia. And the 2 of us would co-lead a workshop on self-esteem, which we did. So we became very good friends. About 15 years later, he teamed up with Mark Victor Hansen, and they were both motivational speakers. And they said to themselves, we have so many great stories that we use in our motivational talks, we should put them together in a book. And Jack was very close to the Jewish community. He himself is not Jewish, but his first wife was Jewish, and he was very close to Jews. And he said he came up with the title Chicken Soup, which is healing, but not chicken soup for the body, but chicken soup for the soul. So they put together 100 stories, Chicken Soup for the Soul, and they went to 30 plus publishers who turned them down.
That's amazing.
Finally, a very small publisher in Florida, HCI, Health Communications, agreed to publish it. And it flew off the shelves like millions of copies. And today, then there was a second helping and a third helping and a fourth, and then Chicken Soup for the Doctor's Soul and Chicken Soup for the Mother's Soul, and there's 150 titles today.
I know today you see books, Chicken Soup
for everything,
with different authors.
Everything, yeah. And they all have Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen and a third person. And the third person is really the one who collects the stories and does it, and the Jack and Mark edit it and help put it together and so forth. But the third person is the one who basically does the book. And so after 20, 30 Chicken Soup titles came out, Jack wrote me a letter. He says, we have Chicken Soup for the Christian soul, and people are asking me for a book on Chicken Soup for the Jewish soul. I said, oh, sure, I'll be glad to do that. It took me, must have been 7, 8 years to compile. I compiled hundreds of stories, not good enough, not good enough, not good enough. And so we developed a system of evaluation where we got 15 people to read the stories. I sent them all of these stories I collected, and they had to grade them from 1 to 10. And we took only the ones who got 9s and 10s, and I sent them to Jack. And Jack sent back the 9s and only the 10s. So years and years of collecting these stories, and finally we got the 100 final stories that went into the book. But the rule was, if you sold 500,000 copies of your book to the third author, co-author, then you could do a second book, like Chicken Soup for the Mother's Soul would be a second helping of Chicken Soup for the Mother's Soul.
Wow.
If you sold 500,000 copies. Well, my book on the Jewish soul only sold 200,000 copies. So it didn't qualify for a second book. But I had 100 more stories that were equally exciting and inspiring. And the criteria, I always said to people, if you have a story that makes the spine tingle and makes your hair stand on end, then that's a Chicken Soup story. Send it to me.
Wow.
So I sent 100 overflow stories to another publisher, Jewish Lights, which was then the leading publisher of Jewish books in America, and they accepted it, and it was published as Jewish Stories from Heaven and Earth. Couldn't use the Chicken Soup title because that was copyrighted. So Jewish Stories from Heaven and Earth, and that became also a very popular book.
And how many copies has that sold?
That has sold thousands, not nowhere near the, a Chicken Soup book automatically has buyers, but this book, it's just as good as the Chicken Soup book, but it doesn't sell as well naturally.
And how does it feel when you walk down the street and you see a bookshop and there your book's in the window, or you see people reading your book, or people coming up to you and saying, "You inspired me, you changed my life by your book"? It must give you a lot of satisfaction, a lot of...
An interesting story. My son, when he was in college at the University of Pittsburgh, went on a year-long, or maybe a semester at sea, and they went all over the world. He was in Hong Kong, and he went to synagogue in Hong Kong, and he spoke to the Chabad rabbi there, and he told them who his stepfather was. He said, "Oh, Elkins." He said, "I have this book here on my shelf." And he was so proud. And then, he has a twin brother. The other twin brother went into a bookstore and saw the Chicken Soup. And their name is in the book because they helped with the computer putting together everything. And so he took it to the bookstore owner. He says, "Look, my name's in here. You want me to sign it?" "Sure." So he signed the book, put it back on the shelf. So, everywhere I go, the fellow who services our computers from South Africa, he says, "Oh my God, we have your book. We read your book. We love your book." And one of the best blurbs in the book is from Alan Dershowitz. He says, if you drink chicken soup, you'll maintain good health. But if you read Chicken Soup for the Jewish Soul, we read them every morning at breakfast in our house. If you do that, then you'll maintain a good, strong Jewish identity. So
that is wonderful.
These kind of things make me very proud, and a great sense of satisfaction that I've helped people live a Jewish life. Yeah.
That is remarkable. From Alan Dershowitz, that is really something. Wow.
Yeah, I've had a wonderful list of maybe 25 endorsements of the book from famous people all over the world. Yeah.
Can I ask just to mention a few? Or?
Yeah, it was one. It was a member of the Israeli cabinet. She was Secretary of Education. Can't remember her name. There was one of the non-Jewish chief of chaplains of the U.S. military.
That's amazing.
Debbie Friedman, the famous songwriter, Aleha Shalom. Joe Biden, who later became Vice President of the United States.
He's now standing for re-election, for president.
Yeah. Bernie Marcus, who founded Home Depot. He has a blurb in there. All kinds of famous people. Susanna Heschel. I became very close friends with Rabbi Heschel's daughter. That's a whole nother interesting story. Rabbi Heschel, when I was a student at JTS, asked me to tutor his daughter.
Really?
So a whole year I spent, she was 12 years old. She was a little brat. And now she's a famous professor in her own right at teaching Jewish history. And I've been friends with her ever since, and she wrote a beautiful endorsement for the book. So the book has, besides that, I got a lot of speaking engagements after the book was published, the synagogues, and after I retired, people wanted me to come to their synagogue and give a series of lectures on the book and on other Jewish themes.
And did you appear on TV programs as well?
Yes, on TV.
In the media?
A lot of, the publisher of the Chicken Soup paid to send me to a professional woman who trained people to give TV interviews.
Wow.
So I had 2 or 3 sessions with somebody.
Well, I don't think you needed any training.
Well,
Just
it's a very specialized niche of how to give an interview on television.
And Dov, when did you come to Israel? Was this a lifelong dream that you fulfilled in coming to Israel?
It was absolutely. At the end, twice a year, at the end of Yom Kippur, the end of Pesach, we say L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim. And my wife kept saying year after year, we keep saying that, but do we really mean it? Or why do we keep saying it year after year, twice a year? If we don't mean it, why do we say it? So we had taken over 40 trips to Israel, leading congregational trips, and every January we came to Israel with the Rabbinic Cabinet of Israel Bonds. So we came twice a year to Israel, for 25 years. And after I retired, we said, let's try living for 6 months. We came for 6 months, and we enjoyed it so much. We came back. We came once or twice more for short trips. So we hate leaving here. Why are we leaving? We love it so much. A friend of ours said, we live in Israel because this is the front row for when the Messiah comes.
Wow, that's true. That's really.
And there are all kinds of reasons that we just love Israel. We said, all right, let's do it. And we did it. And we saw an ad in the paper for an apartment. Well, we actually had 2 apartments. The first apartment we bought was just like a vacation apartment for us to rent out part of the year and live there when we came. And we looked at several apartments, and one was on the street called Ari, and it was number 11. And our oldest grandson was 11 years old, and his name was Ari.
Wow.
So we said, this is a sign from Hashem. Min Hashemayim, we have to buy this. So we bought that apartment. It was a beautiful apartment. And we had it for about 4 or 5 years, but then when we decided to make Aliyah, we said, it's a little too small for permanent living. It doesn't have a machsan, and it doesn't have a garage, it doesn't have. So we looked around and we found this apartment in Sidaf, and we sold that one and bought this.
This is very central. You're near to everything.
It's close to the shuk. I walk to the shuk every single day, and even just to buy an avocado, I go to the shuk every day, just to make sure I have a little walk and keep healthy and
you see the
walking through the shuk is an amazing
it's an experience in itself.
Amazing experience. I go there every single day, and we look out. You saw what our balcony view is. I look out the window and I see the city of Jerusalem, and it's just totally amazing. So it's thrilling.
I know that when I was reading up, and I could spend hours just reading just your biography, but you spent time, I think, in a delegation when you went to Ethiopia, to Addis Ababa.
Yeah, we went, my wife and I, Maxine, I went to Russia for a week to visit refuseniks, and I myself with 3 other rabbis went to Ethiopia. I've always felt a very strong commitment to Klal Yisrael, And whenever the opportunity arose to help Jews, Ba'asher, Haim Sham, wherever in the world, so there was a delegation of 4 rabbis who went to Ethiopia in 1991 or 2 to visit the Jewish community there in Addis Ababa. They had moved from Gondar, and they were in these
This is before Operation Solomon, and before they were brought through to Israel.
So we went just to inspect the situation, to give a little chizuk to the community there and see what was going on. And we visited their schools and their tukels where they lived, and they're like tents, and spent a whole week traveling there, and came back and spoke about it and wrote articles in the newspaper. That was in January, and then that following June, in one weekend, Israel sent like 25 airplanes and whisked them out. It was in between rulers, and there was nobody to stop them because the country was in shambles.
In disarray, they got it at the right timing.
Just the perfect timing. They were planning when it would happen, and they whisked out a plane that would hold 150 people. They had 400 or 500 people in there. Took out all the seats, and people were sitting on. There were babies born on the planes on the way to Israel. And it was a remarkable experience. And our trip to the Soviet Union was also amazing. I wrote a whole book about my trip to the Soviet Union called My 72 Friends. We visited 71 refuseniks. We didn't do any touring in the Soviet Union except one visit to the Hermitage in Leningrad. Other than that, every day was filled with going from house to house, visiting refuseniks, holding Hebrew classes, and we brought 4 suitcases with one change of clothes, and all the rest suitcases filled with books and Talmudim, Tefillin, Sidurim, and everything. And we were trained before we left on how to explain that to the customs when we got there. Well, when we got to the customs in Moscow, they said, "What are you doing with 4 watches?" Well, we need one for this country and where we came, one for where we came from, and one where we're going next. And we knew all the things what to say. Of course, they were to give out. A person could give a watch to a prison guard and get all kinds of special privileges. And when they were fired from their jobs, they had no income, the refuseniks, so they would take a watch and they could get 6 months of food for selling the watch. And we did all kinds of things like that to Russia. When we got to the customs, the guy said, "What are you doing with all these books? You're not going to read all these books." "Oh yeah, we read a lot." And he says, "Well," and so my wife says, "Well, I don't understand. This is supposed to be glasnost and freedom and accepting everybody, and you're not following the Russian. Show me in the Russian Constitution where it says that I'm not allowed to bring these books." He says, "Just a minute." He started shaking. He says, "I'll go ask my supervisor." And all our stuff was taken out of the suitcases, laid out on the table. He went to go talk to his supervisor. And while he was there, my wife took all the stuff, put it back in the suitcase, and we walked off, got back on our bus.
Wow.
By the time he came back, he didn't know what had happened.
It was dangerous. I mean, what you did, we laugh about it, but it was actually very dangerous.
By the time we went, not as much. It was 1987 or 88. But before that, it was more dangerous, but it was a little bit dangerous. And my wife's first trip, she brought back the microfiche of Sharansky's speech to the court.
Wow.
Which was not known in the West. A beautiful speech, world famous now. And she brought it back on microfiche. She gave it to a non-Jewish person on the plane. And this is This is Sharansky's speech. You bring it back till we get off of airspace of Moscow, and this woman was writing her doctoral thesis on Chaim Potok. So my wife lived a few blocks away from Chaim Potok and was friends, and she told Potok about this woman who did a wonderful thing. She carried out Sharansky's speech, and when Potok heard about it, he signed a book for her, and my wife mailed it to her, and she just couldn't believe that she had a book signed by Chaim Potok.
Wow.
She did a great mitzvah. She did, she really took a dangerous move there when she did, but very important.
Wow, so you and your family, you've actually been eyewitnesses to Jewish history, to events unfolding that...
That's an interesting way to put it, but it's true. Yeah. It's true, really. When I think the difference between my parents' lives and the life of my brother and me, my mother never stepped on an airplane. She never had a driver's license. They, of course, didn't know what computers were, and never left New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And what a different world. I mean, my wife and I have been almost to every country in the world on cruise ships, where I get invited to be the rabbi on a cruise ship. And we've been to China twice, to Australia 3 times, South Africa, Asia, Africa, Canada, Alaska, Greece. We've been everywhere.
You were always a scholar in residence, the rabbi
in residence, right.
Wow.
We've had an amazing life, and we've witnessed Jewish life everywhere in the world.
So, Dov, I don't know, I'd like to remind you, but when we went on the Poland trip, you said something, I think you were the only one that spoke from the group, but you said something that I will always remember, because you mentioned that you've been on trips all over the world. And I think you said this Polish trip, that it was more than a trip, it was a journey. It was the most significant out of all the trips that you had been on.
That's true.
And that was really something amazing, because we felt it as well.
Yeah.
I think everyone on that Poland trip felt it.
Yeah.
But you, I mean, having experienced all the different trips you've been on, it was so significant.
Well, a combination of Rabbi Aaron Adler, his lectures on the bus and on the sites and everything he told us, and the places we went, the grave sites of so many tzaddikim, and the synagogues and the history of the death camps and concentration camps. All that put together was the most remarkable week of any of the trips in my entire life. Wow. It really was so powerful. And just this past Pesach, we were at the Dead Sea for the last day of Pesach, and Rabbi Adler gave 4 or 5 lectures, and every time we hear him, he's just phenomenal, over the top.
But you as well. I mean, you've written on Hasidic tales, and you've written on so many different Jewish topics which encompass everything, really.
Well, I'm just about to embark on my 7th book, translating from Hebrew to English, Hasidic stories. This one is the stories of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of Hasidism. So, yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. Very exciting.
Well, Dov, I just want to thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. You are somebody, not only did you preach as a community rabbi, but you walked the walk. It wasn't only preaching, you actually did the actions. You went to help, whether it would be Russia or Ethiopia. You spoke, you didn't just read about coming back in Shana Bab Yerushalayim, but you actually did it here in Yerushalayim. You are such an example, you and your family, that we can all emulate. And it's been a true honor and a privilege to speak to you, to know you, and to read your books. And I would encourage all our listeners to go to their local bookshop and take out not only one but many of the books and be so inspired by such an incredible, really incredible person. You really are somebody we can all dream to aspire to.
Well, thank you so much. People can find my books on my website, which is jewishgrowth.org. It's JEWISHGROWTH, jewishgrowth.org. They can find all my books on that website.
And may we all grow in knowledge and in richness and in reading what you write, and I hope that this talk will inspire many people.
I hope so.
Because your story, your life story is so inspirational.
Thank you so much.
So thank you for the great opportunity.
I'm very honored. Thank you.
So it's a great honor and privilege to meet with you again and to interview you, and I really appreciate the time.
It was my honor, my pleasure.
Thank you so much, Dov. Thank you.
Really.